Beyoncé is one of the most respected artists alive, but I cannot help but sometimes wonder, like, do people even know what they're respecting? There's this weird thing that I've noticed that people do when they're talking about Beyoncé, right? Mainly celebrities. Like if you're talking about like the Met Gala or an award show or something, they will go to celebrities and be like, hey, Beyonce's here. What do you think about Beyoncé? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, it's Beyonce. What do you mean? She's a sensation. She's the artist of our generation. She's the standard, a goddess. Like we're talking about royalty here. Beyonce's incredible. And they go, oh my gosh, I'm glad you agree. What are your favorite Beyonce songs? And they go, favorite Beyonce songs? I mean, there are so many. You have Single Ladies, love that one. One of my favorites is Halo. I love Halo. Yeah, Beyonce is just incredible. And then you're just left like, girl, Single Ladies? Because it's like, what do you mean you swore this woman was Mount Rushmore, but then all of a sudden when it comes time to name a song, the only song you can think of is Single Ladies. You can't think of anything in the past, I don't know, 5 years. And to be clear, like this is not me saying Beyonce doesn't have hits. Like obviously she does. We are not starting the video in delusion, right? But I do think we've reached this weird point in Beyonce's career where it feels like everyone respects Beyonce as an entity, right? They respect the idea of Beyonce, but not a lot of people seem to be engaging with the art itself. And that became really clear with this whole New York Times songwriter conversation, because the second that Beyonce's name got brought into a conversation about a list that she wasn't even on, mind you, the internet does what it does every 2 months, where we all have a conversation about whether or not Beyonce really deserves to be where she is, if she is actually involved in the songwriting or, the music process when it comes to the music that she produces, whether she deserves credit for, the success of her career or whether or not she's a fraud. But I think the real conversation really is so much bigger than just songwriting, because the problem with Beyonce is not that she's not respected. Beyonce is respected as a queen, but she's not respected as an artist. And that's the conversation that I feel like deserves to be had. Hello, if you are new here, my name is Cedric. I talk about pop music and pop culture. And today we are talking about the myth, the legend, the alleged songwriter, Beyoncé Knowles. Now, this video is not trying to say that Beyonce is perfect, right? Beyonce is a person like anybody else, even though she oftentimes seems like so much more than that. Beyonce can be criticized. She is not perfect. And best believe I will discuss my criticisms of Beyonce. But I do think there is a huge difference between a criticism and trying to discredit her as an artist. And that's why I think the whole New York Times songwriter conversation is the perfect place for us to start. I was already planning to do this video because I watched the Met Gala and I noticed that whenever someone was asked about Beyonce, they couldn't name not one song, which is ridiculous. But the video really was like, okay, I have to do it when this whole New York Times songwriter thing came up. Basically, if you don't know what happened, the New York Times put out this list of like the greatest living songwriters of all time or whatever, and Beyonce, surprise, was not on it. But they didn't stop at just, the blog or the article. They had to make like a whole video explaining why Beyonce was not included on this list. And that alone is honestly so funny to me. I think this is the perfect example of what a lot of people call the Beyonce effect. The list itself was not making any noise. Nobody was talking about it because nobody cares what the New York Times thinks about songwriters. But of course, Beyonce becomes the headline. And I don't even think that she needs to be on the list. Like that's not my personal issue with this whole thing. If the purpose of this list was to call out the specific type of songwriter that's like a traditional songwriter where, you go into a studio, you meet the artist right then and there, you have a short little 30-minute conversation with them, you write the entire song for them, you write all, the melody and everything, and then like the artist basically just performs your interpretation of whatever they told you, then like sure, have that conversation, right? But the way that Beyonce gets discussed is always so interesting because people don't just say like, oh, I don't think she deserves to be on this list, like done, conversation over. They act like her whole career needs to now be brought into question, like she needs to be audited by the IRS or something. Beyonce is held to a standard that I don't think anybody else in the industry is held to. How many words did Beyonce write? How many melodies did she actually create? Did she even use her own pen? And like, I'm not saying those questions don't matter. Like, of course those questions matter. Songwriting matters, credit matters, publishing matters. But with Beyonce, the conversation is never like, let's understand the creative process and what actually went down behind the scenes. And it's more like, we've constantly been looking for a way to discredit her. So let's find the easiest possible door to walk through that can undermine her entire body of work. But before I get into the topic of like credits, like songwriting credits or my personal criticisms of Beyonce, I want to quickly talk about why I care about Beyonce so much. Because I need you to understand that this video is not authored by someone who just discovered Cuff It on TikTok and like went with the flow, you know? I don't really consider myself like a card carrying member of any fandom, right? I love music. I love pop music. I love artists. I love the whole idea of artistry. Think of me as like a little gay fairy, just kind of floating around, looking for whatever's sweet and pretty. And then when I'm like, ooh, this smells good, I land on it and I hang out there for a while until I'm done. Can butterflies smell? Anyway. But Beyonce is different for me because growing up, I modeled my singing voice after Beyonce, Brandy, and Mariah Carey. Destiny's Child was some of the first music that I ever remember hearing. Like, I vividly remember my cousins arguing over who was gonna be Beyonce, who was Kelly, and who was Michelle. And first of all, for anyone out there, if you were the Michelle, you have a strong spirit, and I respect it. But we loved Destiny's Child. We all constantly learned their choreography. We were making up our own choreo to their songs around the house. Like, their songs were incredible. But Beyonce always had this draw. She always had this strength to her. She always felt like she was in control of every room that she was in before she like had this massive hold on the industry. When Dangerously in Love came out, for example, I of course remember loving Crazy in Love. But the songs that really got to me were like Baby Boy and Naughty Girl, because I've always been a fan of like Middle Eastern Arabic type of sounds. And then B-Day happened, and that era was massive. We had the Deja Vu video, we had the Get Me Body video, the BET Awards performances, the robot outfit. The robot outfit. If you were there for that, you were my type of person. The Lose My Breath performance, where I learned all 3 choreo sections like rent was due. Beyonce wasn't just someone that I heard on the radio. Beyonce was someone that I studied. So when I critique Beyonce, it's not because I don't get it, it's because I do get it. A big part of the problem with this conversation is that people always assume that songwriting only means lyrics, like the words in the song. And I get why. Like, lyrics are the easiest thing you can point to, right? You can read them, you can quote them. But songwriting is not just the lyrics. Songwriting is also the melody. It's the chords. It's the composition. It's how the chorus makes you feel. And this is where the Beyonce conversation oftentimes for me gets muddy, because while Beyonce has written plenty of songs that are successful, Beyonce's gifts are not only putting a clever sentence on a page. I truly believe that Beyonce's main gift is what she does to the sentence after it is written. Beyonce has the ability to change the emotional temperature of a line. She truly does use her voice like an instrument. And as someone who is putting out music this year with all songs that he wrote by himself, I understand this process a lot more than I think I used to. Because when you're making a song, it's not just like, here are the lyrics, sing them, done, have a great day. I mean, for some people it is, but I won't name any names. There are so many more choices involved in making a song what it is. A lyric sheet is not what makes a Beyonce song. The lyrics are there, but Beyonce is the one who comes in and makes the record breathe. She breathes life into it. And that's why the whole, like, she collaborates, she's so fake conversation drives me crazy. Because collaboration isn't new. Pop music, hip hop, dance music, R&B, these genres have always been collaborative. A lot of your faves have rooms full of writers, producers, creative directors, engineers, but they don't always get the credit. The only difference between them and Beyonce is that oftentimes artists have a brand that make the machine behind them invisible. Beyonce's machine is always very visible because she outwardly credits every single person who had even a lick of a contribution to any given song. I'll see if I can find it, but I remember seeing a video where someone was talking about, making one of Beyonce's songs, and then all they contributed was clapping. They clapped on the song, and Beyonce included them in the credits of a song. All artists are not doing that. A rat could run across the studio, and Beyonce would include that rat in the credits because it was involved. Like, you can't scream, credit the creatives, make sure everybody is included, but then get mad when those credits are too long for you. Fewer credits does not automatically mean that it was a cleaner creative process. It just means that we see less of it. Like, I think we all know that Beyoncé is not sitting in a room by herself, writing all the lyrics, producing all the beats, doing all the creative visual work, filling out the LLCs. Like, I don't think any of us believe that. Beyoncé is collaborative, and she has never been shy about being collaborative. That doesn't make her fake. It makes her a modern pop artist. And I won't harp on it, but there have been so many artists who have come out and thanked Beyoncé for including them in any way, shape, or form on her music, because they all have experienced a rise in their careers just by their names being next to Beyonce's. Beyoncé recognizes that her power is that great, where anybody whose name is associated with her is going to see a boost in their career. Like, I don't know. I think that's pretty incredible. One of the comparisons that I've seen a lot in regards to Beyoncé is comparing her to Taylor Swift. And I think that conversation is very interesting. I had this debate once with a guy who was basically trying to argue to me that Taylor Swift is a better artist than Beyoncé, that she, is just a more incredible all-around pop culture figure than Beyoncé. And this conversation went on for like 15 minutes. But what was interesting about this conversation is that the goalpost just kind of kept moving, right? First of all, it was, well, Beyoncé hasn't had a hit in the past couple of years, like she's over, she's a flop, like she's done. And I was like, well, she had Cuff It, which was a hit. She also had Break My Soul, which was a hit. And then it was like, oh, well, Taylor sells more. Well, Beyoncé can't fill stadiums. Well, Beyoncé doesn't even write her own music. And by the end of the argument, like, I was over it, to be honest with you, but it made me realize that we're talking about so much more than like, Beyoncé versus Taylor Swift. What we were really talking about is the kind of artist that people respect. Taylor Swift is just easier for people to explain and understand. Her brand is very clear. She writes songs about her life and relationships. She plays the guitar and the piano. There's a clear image there. When you think Taylor Swift, you think about her in a room by herself with her guitar writing songs. She's the girl with the pen, the girl with the diary, the girl with something to say about the things that are going on in her, personal and romantic life. And to be clear, I respect that. Like, I truly feel like that is a real form of artistry. I just think that Beyoncé is a different type of artist. When I think about Beyoncé, I think about performance, vocal arrangements, high production, movement, fun, intricate dance movements, a strong visual language. Beyoncé as a brand is taking a room full of collaborators and turning that into a focused, full-fledged world for her fans to dive into. Taylor is easier to explain because the story is relatively simple. Beyoncé is harder to explain because her craft is kind of everywhere. And I think that's a huge part of the reason why everyone basically just dumps her down to like, oh, well, she can't write. Because it doesn't really matter the amount of songs that she's written. If you only value one type of authorship, everything else that she does is going to be invisible to you. For me, the real Beyoncé conversation is not, does she write every single lyric alone? The real conversation is, why do we as a collective have such a hard time talking about the craft when the craft is not just the lyrics? I've seen Beyoncé live multiple times. Beyoncé was my first concert. My first concert ever was the On the Run 2 tour, which was so much fun, except the Jay-Z parts. When I tell you, it was so funny watching the audience, because Beyonce would come out, we would all scream, stand up, be lively, sing the songs, do the choreo, and then she would leave and Jay-Z would come on and it was like, all right, did you want a hot dog? Because I gotta use the bathroom. And that's another thing that people don't really respect about her. They respect the final product, but they don't really always respect all of the blood, sweat, and tears that it took to create that final product. People are just way more comfortable calling Beyoncé a goddess than actually acknowledging all of the work that it took to become a goddess. Which is so wild to me, because Beyoncé didn't just show up out of nowhere. Beyoncé has been here for a minute. For decades, this woman has been working, planning, rehearsing, arranging, singing her ass off. And if you want a clear example of the craft that is Beyoncé, look no further than Renaissance. My favorite Beyoncé album is Renaissance. I love B-Day, I love Lemonade, but Renaissance is different for me. This album is a full body experience. I remember when the album came out, for like a year, I would be doing my singing wedding gigs. And you end the wedding at like 12 midnight. So you're driving home at like 1, 2 in the morning, sweaty, nasty, probably smelling like somebody's champagne. And without fail, for at least a year, I would put on Renaissance from the beginning. Not one song. I wouldn't jump to Cuff It or, Alien Superstar or whatever. I would literally start from the beginning and listen to the entire album all the way through. Because it felt wrong to jump around. Am I alone in that? It felt like you had to experience the album as one piece. It took so long for me to finally start going to the individual songs that I liked versus listening to the entire body of work. The album flows like one continuous piece. Like every song leads into the next. Every transition matters. It feels like you're being pulled through a world, and that is craft. That's not just, oh yeah, some people wrote songs and Beyoncé sang them. That is a vision. That's arrangements. That's sequencing. And some would say that's taste. That's knowing how to create momentum across an entire project. And that's why it bothers me when people like hyper focus on whether or not Beyoncé wrote a line or a verse or a chorus or a bridge or whatever, because Beyoncé is so much more than that. But she is so much bigger than this tiny definition that people seem to only want to pull out when it's time to humble her or discredit her. And if Renaissance proves the craft, self-titled, that proves the impact. If I had to pinpoint the exact album, era, moment that proves Beyonce's impact, it's the self-titled album. Duh. No warning, no rollout, no promo. Just an explosion, an album with a video for every single song, a whole visual world, and everybody talking about it the next day. Everyone was talking about that album. That was not a normal moment. Like, that was disruption. Like, can we talk? Like, not only did she release a surprise album, but every single song had a video. Every song had a visual identity. Every song was part of a larger world. So when people argue that Beyoncé is overrated or she's just not as impactful as people say that she is, I'm just like, you may not personally care, that's fine. But you know who does care? The industry. Your favorite artist cared. The labels, they cared. Beyoncé literally changed the music industry with that album. And that is what impact is. Impact isn't, how many people are playing this song in the car. Impact is, did the industry change because of something that you did? And Beyoncé has changed the industry multiple times. Now, I don't want to turn this into a whole dissertation, right? But I cannot make this video without acknowledging that race is a huge part of this conversation. Now, obviously, not everyone who doesn't like Beyoncé's music is racist. Every criticism of Beyoncé is not racist. Some people just don't like her music, and that's allowed. That's fine. That's valid. You do you. But the patterns around Beyoncé and her career are absolutely racialized. There's a reason that so many people are dedicated to proving that a Black woman cannot be at this level without there being something else going on. There's something behind the scenes that no one knows about, and that's the reason that she's successful. She's actually a music thief. She doesn't write her own music. She can't even sing. She's overrated. That girl is evil. She's an Illuminati chairman. So Beyonce is somehow behind every single tragedy in the music industry since like the invention of the drums. At some point, all these conspiracy theories stop looking like, valid critiques, and it starts to come across as just like a general discomfort. There is just something about Beyonce being too excellent in too many categories that makes certain people very uncomfortable. Because if she's only a singer, they'll say, well, she can't write. If she writes, they'll say, oh, well, she can't produce. If she produces, they'll be like, oh, well, she can't compose. If she performs well, which she does all the time, they'll say, oh, well, it's just her team. She's just a product of whatever they did behind the scenes. If she wins, they'll say it's politics or DEI or whatever. And if she loses, boom, see, she's overrated. The goalpost always seems to be moving, but I would be lying if I said that Beyoncé doesn't have a part of this, because I do feel like Beyoncé's level of privacy does make this whole thing a little more complicated. Now, I get why Beyoncé is as private as she is, right? Beyoncé's been famous for a very long time. She's been famous since she was pretty young. People have been in her business for decades. Do you remember when they thought that Mama wasn't pregnant? That she was lying about her pregnancy because there was a video that when her dress folded. So that means, she's a liar. She's a scammer. There are endless conspiracies about her marriage, her body, her likeness, her children, like everything. So I understand why she's like, y'all ain't getting no more of me than I want you to. You'll enjoy the music and then you won't see me for a year. And on some level, I kind of respect it. That mystery adds to her feeling royal. It makes every appearance of her in the public feel so much bigger. Every interview feels rare. Every move just feels so much more intentional. But unfortunately, the mystery also creates this distance that I don't think always works out well for her. And then, of course, Beyoncé is not going to go out and explain herself when things happen. So I think that people just naturally start to fill in the gaps with whatever imagination bull crap that they can come up with. I think the missing visuals for the last 2 albums are the clearest example of this. Now, I understand that she was just like, I want y'all to focus on the music. I want you to focus on, my voice and, the body of work itself. I think as an artist, that's great. Love that for your artistry, mama. But as a fan, it's like, baby, where are they? Where are the visuals? Because in our defense, Beyoncé has trained us at this point to expect a world. She's the one who trained us to expect the visuals. She's the one who trained us to expect every era to feel like a full sensory experience. So when she withholds all that, it feels like a choice. And it is a choice. But it also makes it harder for casual fans to stay connected. Beyoncé's mystery makes her feel royal, but it also makes her that much more harder to defend. Because when people have things to say about her, she doesn't correct them. She just moves. And that's, to be fair, that's power, right? But it also leaves a lot of room for nonsense to grow legs and then run around the internet. And that is where I do think a bit of criticism of her is fair. I don't think Beyoncé is above critique, and I do think the lack of access to her is a valid conversation. Sometimes Beyoncé's silence makes it hard to know where the artistry ends and the brand strategy begins, if that makes sense. But like I said before, there is a difference between critiquing and discrediting. We can talk about, her specific choices and how those choices have impacted her career. That is totally fine. I consider that to be critique. But saying that any of her choices is some proof that she is never talented is just that's where people lose me. Because Beyoncé is respected as a queen, but she is just not always understood as an artist. And honestly, I'm getting to the point where calling her a queen is kind of too easy. It's really vague, it's symbolic, but it doesn't require you to engage with her art at all. It doesn't require you to know her albums or her songs. It doesn't require you to know the work that she puts into her artistry to make it what it is today. It's just queen. And that's nice, but to be honest, it kind of flattens her. Because Beyoncé is not just, an icon or a brand or a standard. She's a musician. She's an artist. She is a songwriter. She is a singer. She's a world builder. She's a curator. She's a creative director. And if we only talk about Beyoncé as if she's this untouchable entity up in heaven or whatever that comes down and blesses us every once in a while, I think we have a part in helping to create the backlash. Because if people hear goddess enough times, they eventually will start to look for proof that she's human. And that leads to us, instead of having a real conversation about the work, it becomes this tug of war between worshiping and discrediting. And that's boring. Beyoncé is way too interesting for that. It's unfortunate, but I genuinely believe that Beyoncé's impact is not really going to be appreciated until the general public can look at her career from a distance. So when people ask, is Beyoncé overrated? My question is always, overrated at what? As a singer? No. As a performer? Absolutely not. As an album artist? No. As a cultural force? No. And as a songwriter? No. Beyoncé has written plenty of hits. She has written plenty of songs for herself and Destiny's Child. And while I wouldn't put her in the same category as a Taylor Swift, I don't even think they are peers, to be honest with you, but that's a different conversation. But if the only way that you can discuss Beyoncé's artistry is by shrinking the definition over and over again to exclude everything that Beyoncé is good at, I don't think we are still talking about Beyoncé. I think you're just trying to win an argument. And I'm at the point where I'm just going to stop arguing with people about Beyoncé. I think her music speaks for itself. Whether you like it or not, it speaks for itself. Her performance ability alone is better than honestly anybody in the game right now. But that's, again, a different conversation. And I think years from now, people are really going to hone in and appreciate all of the work and the artistry that they just dumbed down to undeserved hype. So I want to hear from you. Do you think that the whole songwriting conversation that keeps coming up with Beyoncé is a valid conversation? Or do you think it's just a lazy way to discredit her? Let me know. And before you start typing, well, she had 68 writers on this song or whatever, first of all, check yourself. But also remember, different perspectives and different worldviews does not make art bad. It actually makes it that much better. So yeah, if you made it this far, I love you. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next one.